next bit of history that I'm about to bring you is about the Deacons for Defense. Okay, the Deacon for Defense was very important to the Black community. Deacons for Defense provided protection when no one else would. Just like no one is interested in protecting the Black community now, this also took place in our past. Now, how did the Deacons for Defense come about? Well, they came about because of all the harassing that the Klan would do in the Black community. And if you know history, you would also be fully aware of the fact that the Klan would come in the Black community, terrorize it, burn homes down. They would snatch Black men out of their houses, kick the door in, snatch them out of their houses, and beat and lynch them. So they were men that were veterans. They were made up of World War II and Korean War veterans that were Black, that decided to step up to the plate and protect the Black neighborhood, because the FBI would start, they, just like any other Black organization, they start spying on the Deacons for Defense. But we're going to get into this article that came out in USA Today on February 6, 2016. The home of the late civil rights activist Robert Hicks received a state historic marker in 2014, and it was recognized on the National Register of Historic Places in 2015. Now his family is working to transform the home into a civil rights museum. Hicks was the leader of the Deacons for Defense and Justice in the 1960s, a grassroots self-defense force that protected the civil rights workers and African Americans trying to register to vote. And that got put under FBI surveillance because of it. Barbara Hicks Collins, the activist's daughter, says the journey to making her father's home a museum started with getting a street name for her father's 4 months after his death in 2010. Then came the state historic marker and the National Register. We're one step closer to completing honoring my father, she said. This is just another accomplishment along the way. Hicks Collins said the process has suffered minor setbacks because the home has been repeatedly vandalized. And I don't need to tell you who the vandals are, because this is a group that stood up to the Klan. The family planned to have the home rewired and security cameras installed. A contractor also told that the home's foundation and roof needed work before the project could move forward. In the meantime, the family's civil rights work will be featured in an exhibit at the Smithsonian Institute Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. The museum is scheduled to open in September. All right, the museum is already open, so, this article is kind of old. But the Deacons for Defense would stand up, in many cases, also to the Ku Klux Klan. And how did they do it? They would outnumber them. They would outnumber and outgun them. So let's say if the Klan came around and it was 10 of them, it would be 50 Deacons for Defense, and they would back down. Okay. And, although we don't revere gangs like we used to back in the day, gangs came about to keep the Klan out of the Black neighborhood. And See, years ago, the gangs would protect the neighborhoods. I know they fight over drugs and territory and all that stuff now, but that's not how it started out. So they had a whole different mindset on protecting their neighborhood. So the Deacons for Defense played a very pivotal role. They also protected Dr. King during his last few marches. He stopped talking all that nonviolent stuff and started turning to the Nation of Islam and also the Deacons for Defense, because he had started changing after being harassed and attacked and family threatened. He started changing his tune away from all that nonviolence talk. But I have a video right here that I want you to listen to, and it's about these are the actual members of the Deacons for Defense telling you what the experience was like. Let me go ahead and roll this video.
The Deacons for Defense and Justice, commonly known as the Deacons, was a little-known civil rights African-American group which made its mark mainly here in Louisiana and in southern Mississippi cities from 1964 until the end of that tumultuous decade. The Deacons for Defense had its genesis in the lumber mill community of Jonesboro, Louisiana in 1964. I'm Ward Cooling, a graduate student at Louisiana State University, and I'm going to introduce you to some amazing men and let them tell you their stories.
Okay, right here, this building here is the old Masonic Lodge. It's where the Deacons started out, where we had our first meetings. We had meetings at several other places, but that was one of the major places we had meetings because the fact we couldn't have meetings everywhere. We had at some of the churches, but that's basically where the Deacons got started here in this old building. And that was in the early 64. And the reason for us organizing the Deacons because we had a lot of people from up north was here to help us with our voters registration and to help us with a lot of other Jim Crow things that was going on during this time. And they didn't have any police protection because the police was trying to do everything they could against them because they didn't want them here. So we felt like if they come this far, risk their lives and their future to help us, we should do the same for them.
The primary goal for Louisiana's Deacons for Defense was to protect Black sections of towns and civil rights activists, Black and white, from those who did not want to see integration succeed and who did not hesitate to use violent acts to stop it. The Deacons armed themselves and made it clear that this sort of intimidation was going to stop one way or the other. And for the most part, the Klan backed down when confronted. If you have not heard of them, you aren't alone. The group is not discussed in high school history classes. It grew to include chapters in a dozen Louisiana and southern Mississippi cities. The Deacons acted only in defensive roles and only when provoked. In fact, only one white man was ever shot, and that was by accident. He also lived. The Deacons, whose overall membership probably never exceeded 200, was also very instrumental in marches, sit-ins, integration efforts, voter registration moves, and other key African-American movements during the civil rights. Although their visibility faded by 1970, about a dozen of these men still live in Louisiana and keep in contact with one another.
Deacons of Defense. If you read this Lance Hill's book, Deacons for Defense, he spells out when the Deacons were formed. They were formed one night in Jonesboro. Mike Les and I had gone out on the highway, and from Jonesboro to Monroe. And we got on the highway, 3 carloads of whites began to trail us. And telling Mike, we know about the 3 boys in Mississippi. We're just not going to die out here between these 2 swarms. That was the night we played chicken with the Ku Klux Klan.
the Deacons For Defense it wasn't that we were advocating violence, but we were a self-protection organization that defended our community. We weren't going to put up with the nonsense of the Ku Klux Klan and other races who wanted to, in other places they burned, murdered, and lynched, and we weren't going to tolerate it. The deacons were basically, just as I explained to you before, the ones that would take these weapons and defend the citizens, and that's what we did for ourselves as well as for others. We would take it on ourselves to arm ourselves and to make sure that we were given proper protection, because homes were being bombed and burned, and nothing has been done about it. I was more of a self-defense and protecting our community and voting, registering people to vote, and trying to make the system that we live in better. Well, I would think the hardened part of the deacons was like anybody else. I'd say that enough is enough. They are men with families, children, families as such, and they're men. They're not shirt tails, as they say. They're not Uncle Toms. They are men. They would do whatever it takes. A lot of them were World War II and Korean War veterans. They loved their country. They wanted to enjoy it, and they wanted their children and their grandchildren to be able to enjoy it. But a lot of them went over to Europe and Korea and fought for it. That was the freedom of their community.
We found a purpose greater than ourselves. And that's when you get caught up in something. Get caught up in the wind. And you're guided by a force you cannot see. And once in it, the question is, when can we stop? When should we stop? And the answer to that was when victory is won. So we either continue until victory, and in many cases until death.
During the weekend, the young whites would come in the community and they would be drinking, and when they finished drinking, they used to come through the neighborhood and, yell the N-word and do different things in the community. And so on the weekends, we basically had a 1960 Infada. We had our bricks and rocks when they would come through. With that nonsense, we were actually we were rocking. We were hitting them, throwing rocks and bricks. Trying to retaliate to them for the things that they were doing. If they caught you walking along in our community or walking outside of the community, a lot of times they would attack you. Well, I think one in particular was the bombings. That's when everybody was up in arms, as we'd say. Well, not really up in arms, but that's when they were maddest, okay? That's when everybody was really ready to take them on, And of course,
bombings. What do you mean?
The bombing of houses, homes, I mean, these people actually go around throwing Molotov cocktails into your windows, into your porches, or wherever they can get close enough to throw it, to burn your house and to burn whoever's in there. They didn't care. So that's when the deacons or the protective forces would take their most stand
is at that point, because everything was hottest at that point.
5,000 students of Southern started marching down on December 21st, 1961. And that demonstration was broken up with tear gas and fire hoses and dogs. 21 of us went to jail. I was one of the 21 in jail with Dave Dennis, Robin Lujo, the Army Bailey. We spent the Christmas in jail, the Christmas of '61, in jail in Baton Rouge. And then the president of Southern, Faculty Corps, was ordered by the Board of Education to expel us from school. So we were expelled from the university.
When we pulled up, I was in the car with Sam Bond and Charles Sam. We were all the three that went up there at first. And Charles Sam asked me to lay my pistol down and go in there and get him and walk out with him. Now, Charles Sam was if you heard him speak, he was very convincing in the speech. And, but my trust and confidence that Sam Boyd wouldn't leave me. You know, I had that kind of confidence no matter what the odds were. And Sam Barnes told me, see, you can leave your God and go in there, because I knew he had his. And he was going to back me up, whatever. When I walked in the door, before I got inside, I could hear them laughing. They felt like they had opponents, you know. And when I walked in that door, all of the laughter stopped and got as quiet. You could hear the pin drop. And one of the claimants said, "Here come them damn Deacons." And Fletcher Anderson and Lake Griffin got up and walked out. And that's the thing I really remember most about Sam. Was a very bold and brave individual. We had history where you had a march that was longer than Selma to Montgomery from Bogalusa to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and very hostile territory. And but you don't hear that much about it. Charles Sims was the president of the Deacons, and he was the voice of the Deacons. But you know, when you start talking about the boldness of a deacon that didn't have any fear, you was Sam Barnes, Rowan Burris, you know, the Bertrand Wise. You had a lot of the older guys that they didn't have any fear. I started out as a protester. I was a street soldier, I guess you would say, in the Deacons For Defense and Justice. I was one of the younger members.
And how old were you at this time?
In 1964, I hadn't made 17 yet. I was 16.
I was one of the persons who felt that it was unfair practice, and that unless we stood up and showed that we did not agree with it, and that we would go whatever extent it takes to stop it. And that's what we did.
You know, they kept it under wraps because I was underage, but I was an armed deacon. I did mobile patrols with them, patrolling the neighborhood. I also pulled guard and built various homes of civil rights leaders and homes where people in our community were housing the civil rights workers that's paying the Bogalusa.
Well, I think the Deacons, for instance, is serve their purpose, and right now, the Supreme Court and the courts of the land are listening. So now you don't need them. See, this was sort of a way that you could feel safe as can be because you knew then that after you've tried everything you can try, you still had another leverage, another means of protecting yourself somewhat. But now you don't need that, because if something should happen, you got the media, you got you guys, you got people that's going to talk. Back then, you wouldn't say nothing because you wouldn't be allowed to. They would kill you too.
But the number of deacons, you know, that was secret. That was you might look for us in one spot and we'll pop up somewhere else. Wherever it was a hot spot, deacons had a habit of showing up. And that's where we were effective at.
Well, I think now the deacons are basically the youth. I mean, the young folks now are not going to take what these old folks took back then, and they know that. So they know you come, you better come right to, because they out there, they ain't gonna take it now. But back then, the people were afraid. I mean, they really were. I mean, and they had every right to be, because they would have been mistreated so long, so bad, until they felt there was no other recourse. They had to take it. But now, the young people knowing that, you bleed like me, so don't try it.
You still have some of the ones in my group, my age group, and some of them are older still now, but they got a younger group. They listen to what we've told them, and they already have their ideas, and they're willing to lay down and defend their community. And so, we're not, I say, the mass. We're just laying semi-dominant. If the need arises, they're there.
The hardened kernel of a deacon is somebody that will stand up. Stand up. I mean, go to court, go to appeals, go to whatever means that the law provides to get a point across. And once you have been given a decision of the land, then you got to live by it.
Well, some of them were known. Some didn't try to have it. Like, you had your president, he was a spokesman, Charles Sam. He was a spokesman, so his face was out there. And I never tried to have it. You had some that they were low key, but the authorities and the clan, they knew who some of them were, like Rowan Burris or others. People like Rowan, they didn't have, Fletcher Anderson, but they didn't have it. They were clan. Sam Barnes, we call him the clan, another clan.
I felt that I was doing what was right, and I didn't do anybody any harm. I did not, and I still don't hold any animosity or any grudge against any of those white folks. I don't know any of them that I hate for what they did. I do believe that they did what they did because they thought they were doing the right thing.
It's not up to us anymore. It's up to each generation to see what needs to happen and step up to the plate. You cannot, this generation cannot parade on Martin Luther King's Day and think that they're doing something.
Got a lot of different archives. I know that University of California, Berkeley has a lot of information, and they have a museum, I think, it's got a lot of archives in Harlem, in New York. And Johnson's publications should have a lot. But I would ask a lot of our young students to do research and look it up and let the story be told, because the Deacons For Defense movie that Forrest Whitaker now did, it was not always factual, but it was a lot of fiction in it also.
Young Afro-American men, I think today, need to read our book, The Deacon For Defense, and they will get a lot out of reading it, because it goes back to where all this started. and it would show them where we came from and where we are now. And somewhere down the road, they would lost a little ground, but still, if they would read it and consider trying to help to do something about it, we could come back and really do a lot more in this respect. But the book is one of the most important things. They need to read it. And, well, the movie, which it's okay, but I think you need to read the book. It's nobody to really talk to about it because it's not that many of us left to talk to. But the main thing is get the book and read it. And when you read it, so you need to read something more than one time to really understand it. You need to read it about 3 times. We make sure that you understand it and know what we went through and how much hell we went through at that time trying to get to where we are now.
Okay. You can watch the full movie on the Deacons For Defense. It is online, and you can, I did come across it. It's over, I think it's like an hour and a half, maybe a little longer. But it's definitely there if you want to get more of an understanding of who the Deacons For Defense were. This is an FBI report. Just like any other Black organization, when you have notoriety and you are known, and because these were armed Black men, they were under a surveillance watch by the FBI. The reason why I admire this group, they were one of the few groups of Black men that were armed that got the Klan to back down. They kept their asses in check. 200 Black men that were fully armed got the Klan down there in Louisiana to back down out of fear. And like I said, they would outnumber the Klan. See, it would only be, let's say, like about 5 of them going to a Black person's house to cause a problem. So it would be 20 Deacons of Defense that would be there to combat them. So because they were always outnumbered and outgunned, they would back down from even dealing with the Deacons For Defense. They realized they had they had some real deep competition dealing with these Black men. And like I said, they were veterans from the Korean War and World War II. And some of them were young guys that just wanted to be part of it. But really, if you get a chance, watch the movie that's on YouTube about the Deacons For Defense. Forrest Whitaker is the leading actor in the whole thing, and it's really a good movie. Please leave your comments and subscribe, and if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family.